So just a little background about the International Owl Center, if you're not already familiar with us. As I said, we're located in the southeast corner of Minnesota. We're the only all owl education center in the United States, weirdly enough. There's a lot of raptor centers, but we're focused just on owls. So we can go really in depth into a lot of this stuff. We present an International Festival of Owls every year in the first weekend in March, which, hallelujah, we were able to do this year. If it would have been one weekend later, we would not have been able to do it. And we present the World Owl Hall of Fame Awards. So we have experts from around the world winning awards coming here to receive them and speaking. So we get to learn from the experts ourselves, which is fantastic. So we like to delve way in depth into owls. A lot of times, because people are talking about raptors in general, they talk about owls in general. Well, owls sure have a lot of things in common, but they're really actually a diverse lot. We always think owls are nocturnal, owls can turn their head so far, owls this, owls that, and most of that stuff doesn't apply to all owls. So the fun thing we get to do is talk about the differences between owls. And today we're going to be talking about feet. So we'll talk about what makes owls' feet special, but also what makes them different from each other. So you're going to have to hold on because my camera is going to go for a ride. So you can see specimens here. We have all kinds of specimens that we use at the Owl Center. These are not things that we kill. They are found dead, and we have salvage permits so that we can keep them. We have to file state and federal reports every year on these, but they're not something that we're killing on purpose. We get some of them from rehabilitators, from animals that have died, very often roadkill. Sometimes things have starved to death, but for whatever reason, then we're able to keep them. Then we prepare them. So these have had muscle removed from them. Some of them, like this one, okay, this is not a great specimen. Hang on, I need to pin my video so I can see what I'm doing. Bear with me here. There we go. Now I can see what I'm doing here. So this is not an owl foot. So you'll see this on some of the owl foots. Feet is the plural of foot. That's a good one. They have a lot of tendons in their feet. Both hawks and owls do. So when I was taught to prepare specimens, I was taught to pull the tendons out, which is really difficult because the bottom of their feet is really, really tough. And then you pull the tendons out and you have to sew it back together, which again is really, really tough. But the one thing this does, because it's not a well-prepared specimen, is it lets you look in there a little bit. So again, this is a red-tailed hawk foot. It's not an owl foot, but you can see that there's not a whole lot of space in there, but there's tendons that just go into those spaces. And that's about all their foot is tendons and bones covered with various things. So in a hawk, this is more like what we think of bird feet. We have 5 toes. Most birds have 4 toes. And as I said, this is a red-tailed hawk. So they have 3 toes in the front, 1 toe in the back. And there's a special word for that toe arrangement. It's called anisodactyl, which don't worry about that because that's not what owls are. This is a Cooper's hawk foot. Again, the same thing, 3 in the front. Focus for me. There we go. 1 in the back. And then let's move over to an owl foot, which is very different in a whole lot of ways. So they have 2 toes in the front, 2 toes in the back. So again, they have 4 toes, but the toe arrangement is different. And the thing that's cool about owls is this toe goes back and forth. They can put it in the back, which is normally what they do if they're grasping or they're about to grasp or they're standing on a perch or they're ready to grab some prey. They put this toe in the back. So the 2 forward, 2 backwards toe arrangement is called zygodactyl, starting with a Z. Z-Y-G-O-D-A-C-T-Y-L. So zygodactyl is the word of the day. Thank you, Joe, for putting that in there. 2 in front, 2 in the back. And the reason this toe can move, it's really fun. We actually have foot bones reassembled. And believe you me, this is difficult to do. So this toe that we're looking at here, can I get it focused? Kinda. There we go, is the outer toe of an owl. And you can see that attachment is kind of a sliding attachment. It's not just a fixed little joint. And there's 3 little bones there that helps them to move that toe quite a lot. Whereas the other toes, can I do that? That one has much bigger bones, and it has a very distinct attachment point, as do the other. This toe has a very distinct attachment. And then their hallux, that's kind of their hind toe, kind of like their thumb. That bird, all birds, well, I won't say all is a dangerous word when you're talking about nature. All and none usually don't apply. Come on. The hind toe has a bizarre attachment. Almost focused, almost. There's this weird bone there. You can kind of see tucks into the back groove of the leg. It's not wanting to focus beautifully. So I'll just talk while it thinks about it. There we go. It's this bizarre thing that sits in there, and that's what the hind toe attaches to. If you look at the bone, looking down at it, see how it's kind of curved like a tube? And it wraps around the tendons that go down into the leg. And it's mostly just tendons and ligaments that are going down there. Not much for muscle at all. And the fun thing that you can see here too, if I can get it to focus, that is a cross section of the leg bone, the tarso-metatarsus, or most people just call it their tarsus. You can see it's not hollow. That has, and those of you who were here for the bone program saw this last week, that's got marrow in it. So not all bird bones are hollow, because birds do indeed need to make blood cells just like we do. So they have to have marrow in some of their bones. So the leg bone, as skinny as it is, does have marrow in it. It's wing bones that tend to be more hollow. So anyway, the bones of a foot, the talons are bone on the inside with a sheath on the outside. So let's go back to the cool part, the outer parts of the feet. So this is a barred owl foot, B-A-R-R-E-D, as opposed to barn. And most owls we think of having, they've got feathers on their legs. Everybody's got that. Most of them have feathers on their toes. So this is a moderately feathered toed owl. Does somebody have a question in there? Does the toe that switches from the front to the back have a special name? As far as I'm aware, this does not have a special name. The hallux, the hind one that doesn't move, that has a special name. But the other ones are just 1, 2, 3, 4, that kind of a thing. They just number them. Now, let me get the hawk feet out of here. The coolest thing about owl feet are the owls that live in cold climates. Look at these guys. Check that out. You can easily see that those are from owls that live where it's cold because they're so fluffy. Snowy owl, I mean, this looks like fur, right? Let me get it to focus. It doesn't look like feathers, but those are modified feathers that look like fur. So remember, they're birds. Birds do not have fur. As much as that looks like fur, those are modified feathers. But because they live where it's really, really cold, they're extremely densely feathered. And if I turn this over, you can't really even see the bottom of the foot. It is so densely feathered. And then their talons, which of course you all know their toenails are called talons, just barely stick out from just this huge glob of feathers. It's just feathers, 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 feathers. So very much designed for cold weather. Now we have some other owls that are designed for boreal forest living, which is pretty cold too. So those are really cold forests up north. This is a great gray owl foot. Looks like I love them because it looks like they're wearing leg warmers. Their toes aren't quite as densely feathered, but the legs are really densely feathered. So that's a great gray. Northern hawk owls have these fantastic, just super fluffy toes and a really short tarsus. So for comparison, this is the tarsus of a great gray owl, right there, that whole part. And this is actually technically, the whole thing here is the foot. The heel is where my finger is up here. Some people think their knees look like they bend backwards. They don't. That's actually where their heel is. Their knee is tucked way up into their body. Owls have long legs. You've probably seen the Facebook post with the owl with ridiculously long legs. That's what's tucked up under there. But what we're looking at is literally just the foot. This is the tarsus on this great gray owl. And if you look at this hawk owl, they have extremely short, tiny tarsi. So tarsus is singular, tarsi with an I is plural. I see somebody asked why it's called a hawk owl. It's because they're more day active, they fly more like a hawk, they're bird hunters, they're not necessarily nocturnal like a lot of other owls are, so they're very hawk-like in a lot of different ways. And do the talons shed? Let me see if I can find one here. Not really, it doesn't show it well, but you can see on the snowy owl at the tip, this part is going to come off, well, would have come off if it had continued to live. Come on. So they do shed, it's kind of weird. It doesn't come off as one chunk, it comes off in pieces, like this tip would come off. Sometimes flakes come off from the side. So that does happen in owls. So this is a snowy owl foot. And hawk owls, boy, when you band a bird, you'll see this on another one. This is where the band goes, is on the tarsi. So when you have a bird that's got these little weeny tarsi, A, they're hard to hold on to and keep control of, and B, it's hard to get the band on there. So yeah, really short tarsi. This one is from a boreal owl. So again, an owl that lives where it's very, very cold, very, very dense plumage. I see Shara asked, is the talon length in proportion to the size of the foot, or could it be out of proportion depending on the type of prey? Good question. I'm not sure. There was J.F. Therier was doing some research on curvature of talons, but I don't know if he looked at it in relation to these other things you're asking about. So I'm not certain. There's a whole lot of things I don't know and that people don't know in general. This is a northern saw-whet owl foot. So little teeny weeny thing, but it's fluffy because they tend to be where it's colder, but they do migrate south. They go farther south than people think. These things can show up in Alabama, Georgia, Kentucky regularly. Not many, but some of them do. So they have decent feathering. Now compare that to something totally different, but similar in size. Let me get that focused. Focus. I need a hocus pocus focus. I know it can focus that close. There we go. So this is a ferruginous pygmy owl foot. These guys live way in the southern United States, mostly in Mexico and farther south. So they're where it's warm. They are more diurnal. They're bird eaters. They're not very owly in a whole lot of ways. But you can see their, excuse me, the toes have bristles on them rather than dense feathering because they live where it's really warm. So you don't need to keep your toes that warm. You'll see this one is also wearing a band. This is not a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service band. It's a color band with, should have a number on it. Yeah, you can see a number on it. This one came from a wildlife rehab center in Arizona, and they had the individuals numbered so they could tell them apart in captivity. So this is not a U.S. Fish and Wildlife band. This one, I think, died of old age. Ferruginous pygmy owls, there's a subspecies called the cactus ferruginous pygmy owl that's been on and off the endangered species list in the United States many times. And they're at their edge of their range in the US. So that's why they've been off and on and off and on and off and on based on lawsuits. But these folks at Wild at Heart in Arizona were asked to breed them when they were on the endangered species list. So this is part of that. So they did successfully learn how to breed them in captivity. It worked, but they never were told or allowed to release any. So it just went back and forth in politics, and some of the birds just literally got so old they died, which is probably what happened to this individual bird. But anyway, if you look at the toes, very different from what we've been looking at. And barn owls. Barn owls have really cool feet. Back up, much bigger. This is a barn owl foot. There we go. And you can see a barn owl has bristles on its toes. Ooh, that's nice. So they do have feathers. Those are modified feathers, but they're just reduced down to bristles. So they're not designed to keep their toes warm at all. So barn owls that we have showing up here in Minnesota, I don't know how they get through the cold weather here, because they're just not built for cold weather. So compare that to something that normally lives around here, like the barred owl or a screech owl. They've got moderate feathering on their toes. Here's a long-eared owl. That's kind of normal for what we have in the northern parts of the US. So barn owls, yeah, I don't know how they manage. The other thing that's super cool about barn owls that other owls do not have is a pectinate talon. Now, can I get it to focus? The edge of this talon is serrated. Come on, focus. Can you see there's some notching there in the talon? And that notching, they think, helps with grooming. There are some other species of birds, like nighthawks, that have pectinate toes like this, that they believe help in grooming. But barn owls have that. Other owls don't have that. So that's a unique adaptation. Now, other owls do have that flange that sticks out, but it's not serrated like that. And I don't know if I can show you on the snowy owl. It's so fluffy, it's hard to... Bear with me, going for a ride here with the camera. Okay, try to focus. Try to focus. Okay, can you kind of see that that's not just round in cross section? It's got kind of that flange sticking out from it. And it's the same talon, it's the outer one in the front that's got that, and that's what they scratch themselves with. So when they're scratching, it's the outer toe that faces forward that they scratch with. So this, it has just a flange, but in barn owls it's got that pectinate talon on it. A couple other things. Ruby, our great horned owl, is due for new jesses, and these go on the legs, on the tarsi. So this is a barred owl foot, but it goes around here. These will get put on in the next few days. They're made out of kangaroo leather, which is strong, but it's quite supple. So it's soft for them to wear. It's notched in the edges here, so it gives, it's not hard at the edge. And then this is a dress that she can't take off. And it's got a slit down in the bottom that we can attach a leash to when we take her out. So this probably going to be meeting Ruby a little bit later on today. So the jesses she has on are getting a little bit dry, and you'll see she's bitten at them some. So those are going to be replaced. Piper is also going to be getting new jesses. Hers are a little bit different. This ankle part is removable. So we put that on first. and then the Jess strap goes in through that. And with Piper, we just leave the straps on. Theoretically, we could take them off, but generally owls don't like it when you mess with their feet on a regular basis. They tend to bite, which hurts, believe it or not. So we tend to leave them on. Now, JR has had some issues with his leg feathers, so he doesn't wear any at all. And he's more amenable to us putting Jesses on when we need them. And same with Uhu. She doesn't do well wearing Jesses, so she wears nothing other than we put on some that are like this when we have to take her out of her aviary. So there's different methods of doing this, but it all goes onto technically the foot, onto the tarsus of the leg. Any more questions about specimens? JR is an eastern screech owl. Yeah, Uhu's the eagle owl. One thing we get asked about a lot is grip strength. Let me put the camera back here so you don't have to keep going for a ride. There you go. You can take off your seat belts now. Oh, Susan asked, do we put, yeah, Mariana answered, do we put one of these on one leg or both legs? We do both legs because it's more even and less stress. If you just put it on one leg, it can be a lot of stress on one leg. So we put two on, and they have to be the same length so that you're not getting differing amounts of stress on each leg. And somebody else asked, do the Jesses get soiled with uric acid when you leave them on and disintegrate? For a vulture, yes, because vultures specifically poop on their legs to help cool off. So Jesses and vultures don't always go well together, but owls don't poop on their legs. They're very good about keeping their feathers clean, so they don't poop on them. To what owl does the spotted eagle owl compare in the USA? From Hetty. They compare to the great horned owl, except a lot smaller. They're both bubo species, but the spotted eagle owl is quite a bit smaller than the great horned owl is. Yes, and owls do preen the Jesses sometimes also. Like our owls have all grown up wearing equipment, so they're very used to it. It's not weird for them. They know how to navigate using them, and they just kind of consider them part of themselves. So it's funny, they'll be preening their leg feathers, and then they'll just go off and preen their Jess also. And they'll oil their Jesses too when they're using the oil gland at the base of their tail, and they rub that on their tongue and they're smearing it on their feathers. They will sometimes also do that on their Jesses. It's just like they consider it part of themselves. One question I want to talk about that we always get, what about grip strength? How strong are their feet? And this is a really difficult one to answer because how do you measure that? Those of us who have held an owl on a glove and that owl gets really mad, upset, or something or other, they can grab really hard. And we're wearing leather gloves that are 2 layers of leather thick. I had one great horned owl puncture through 2 layers of leather. Mostly they'll bite really hard, grab really hard, and bruise, but so they can bruise through that. But how hard can they actually grab? Now there's only one study that I've actually found that did good measurements of this, and I would consider them lower threshold and not maximum grip strength. So their methodology is really important when you're talking about grip strength. Typically, when an owl, well, I mean, they're going to grab like this. The 2 forward toes and the 2 backward toes are going to grip. So you're measuring the pressure on the perch is what they're doing. So they took a perch, put whatever in it, and hooked it up to hydraulics and measurements and computers and whatever. But what they did is they put the birds on the perch, and these were all captive birds that had been trained in some way. And then they either pushed them on the chest, pushed them on the knees, or grabbed the Jesses that they were wearing and pulled them back. And that was what they considered the grip strength. Now, from having worked with birds, I think they can grip a lot harder than they would in those situations. So they came up with average grip strengths. But I mean, we want to know what maximum grip strength is, right? So I converted, they had it in newtons. I converted it to pounds because most of us are from the US and working in pounds. But the cool thing was they looked at hawks and the owl counterpart. So a red-tailed hawk is considered the counterpart of a great horned owl, red-shouldered hawk, the counterpart of a barred owl, and a kestrel, the counterpart of a screech owl. In general, those owls could grasp twice as hard as the hawks. And a part of that is because the tarsi, or the tarsus, on an owl tends to be shorter and thicker and more robust than on a hawk. They tend to be, where'd my hawks go? Longer and skinnier and not as solid. So owls are much stronger in grip strength than hawks are, probably on average double. So what they found for a great horned owl, and these were the maximums that they came up with. Great horned owl, 60 pounds, and I'm rounding a little bit here. Red-tailed hawk, 27 pounds. Barred owl, 15 pounds. So it exponentially is stronger the bigger the bird gets. Barred owl is 15 pounds. Red-shouldered hawk was 9 pounds of grip strength. Eastern screech owl was 6 pounds of grip strength, and a kestrel 3.5 pounds. So a great horned, they can grab hard, as anybody on our staff knows, because Rupert used to do that. He didn't like being an education bird, eventually got transferred to another facility where he didn't have to be an education bird and could be a breeding bird instead. I see some questions here. Somebody, let's see. You're aware of wild owls surviving after losing a foot. Wait, that jumped around. Or such an injury, handicap, impossible to survive. Yes, it has happened on rare occasions where they have found a bird of prey, either a hawk or an owl, missing a foot and successfully surviving. Usually it doesn't work well because when they stand, they tuck one foot up to help keep it warm. And when you only have one foot, you can't tuck it up. I also knew of one that had 2 healed over, both removed, female great horned owl, but that probably only worked because it was right after nesting season and the male would bring food to the nest. So he was probably supplementing her. And then when he was no longer bringing food to the nest, she was found starving with her feet healed over. But it's not normally an injury that they do well with. What else? Why would owls need that much more strength? The people in the paper thought it was good for basically having them have a different ecological niche because they can kill slightly different animals than a hawk. I mean, you've got day and night anyway, but if you've got stronger grip strength, if you're a great horned owl, you can take a wild turkey, great blue heron, skunk, small raccoons, small dogs. Red-tailed hawk's not going to be able to do that. So it puts them in a slightly different food niche with a stronger grip strength. So that was their theory. Let's see. Do owls ever swipe crows with their talons? Because crows hate great horned owls. So if you hear the crow alarm going and everybody's just going nuts, there's probably a great horned owl there. And great horned owls do sometimes grab the crows and pay them back for yelling at them. So yes, that does happen. Is it the grip strength strangulation that kills their prey before eating it? And do owls eat prey alive, usually in the wild? When you watch an owl kill, it's usually this kind of a thing. There are some, like falcons, will usually go for the back of the neck and with their bill, snap the neck. Now, owls like to crunch the head also with their bill, but when you see them killing, it's this motion with their feet. And do they usually eat prey alive in the wild? I honestly can't say. I haven't seen enough to know for sure. Will an owl hunt a wood duck as food? Great horned owls kind of eat anything, so I'm pretty sure they would. Let's see. There's a whole bunch of questions in here. This is great. Yeah, and Karen asked and Joe already answered, does a screech owl have the pectinate talon? Nope, they don't. Are great horned owls the only ones that kill crows? Could a barred owl? I'm not sure. I would think it'd be difficult prey for a barred owl, but I wouldn't rule it out. a spotted eagle owl going after big rabbit, that's a pretty ambitious spotted eagle owl because their feet are much smaller than our great horned owls are. Okay, I think that gets through most of this, and I probably better shut up because you probably actually want to see a live owl, right? No, nobody ever wants to see a live owl, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to Jo while I go out and get Ruby, and she's going to give you a little tour of our website so you find out what's there. We've got all kinds of stuff hiding on our website, probably more than you ever knew, unless you've been at the last few programs, and then you should be getting really good at what we have on our website and where to find it. So I'm going to pause my video and mute myself and turn you over to Jo.
Jo is going to do the tour, not Ruby.
Oh, sorry.
It just sounded like that.
Ruby will be featured later.
Okay, let me start screen sharing. There we go. So our website is internationalowlcenter.org. The first time you show up, you'll see this pop-up that says if you want to sign up for one of our email lists, you can do that there. If you accidentally close it, you can get back to that down here on the lower right. I've done that so many times, but if you click it, that pop-up comes back up. On the front page, you can see our upcoming events. Like you can see, hey, this is happening right now. Next week, we'll be doing one about owl calls. Over here on the left, we have our menu. On the top is programs and events, so that goes over the different kinds of events that we have. In the winter, we do owl prowls, so we take people out in the wild and try to find wild owls. That's a lot of fun. We do some special programs, like a couple of years ago we had Marianne come and talk about her work with the eagle owls. That was pretty cool. We do have our Festival of Owls every year. That's a 3-day full weekend all owl event in March. That's a lot of fun. So if you want to learn about more of our programs, you can go there. Future plans is next. We do intend to build a permanent facility. Right now, we just rent a building in downtown Houston, Minnesota, which works for now, but it does already need some upgrades. So you can see what we'd like to do in the future there. Next down is our research. Our main research is with great horned owls, so you can see our live cam. You can watch that from here, or you can go to our YouTube page, and that's also where I'll be posting the video for this program later today. If you're interested, you can join the chat. You can talk to Marianne and Ducky and Maxine and all kinds of people. Let's see. You can also, you can learn more about the individual owls, because you can actually tell individual owls apart by their voice, which is pretty cool. Different kinds of owl vocalizations, background information about our birds. Next down is DIY activities, so you can take a quiz and find out what kind of owl you would be. I am apparently a spotted owl because I'm a picky eater and I like to be by myself. Go figure. You can build an owl nest box. You can print out coloring pages and puzzles to do if you're stuck inside and you don't have anything to do. Well, we're all stuck inside. If you found an injured owl, this is owlet season. Honestly, this time of year we get a lot of calls from people who found a baby owl on the ground, and most of the time they don't actually need any help because they're just learning how to fly. They jump out of the nest and they kind of do what they feel like. So if you do find an owl and you're not sure about it, you can go to what do I do, and that kind of goes over different ways to tell if that owl actually does need help, how to help it if it does. If you need to find a rehabber in your area, I know not everybody lives in Minnesota because that would be weird. You can go here. We have a list of wildlife rehabbers across the US. That's also listed under I found an injured owl. But if you go here, it might be a little bit laggy. We have a list of all the rehabbers that we could find. So Let's say you're in Alaska. Oh, there's a lot of options here. You could go to the Bird Treatment and Learning Center. You could call the Juneau Raptor Center, Alaska Raptor Center. So there's a lot of options there. If you're in maybe Nevada, there's not a lot of options. You can call the Nevada Department of Wildlife. Otherwise, you can always call us, and we can try and help you find somebody who can help that bird. This was a screech owl that was found inside under the hood of a truck, which doesn't seem like a great place to be. Down here, Owls and You can learn how to live an owl-friendly life. There are lots of things you can do in your daily lives to help owls. That's actually the motto of the Owl Center, is helping the world make a better place for owls. So you can keep your cats inside, you can use less paper, you can use mouse traps instead of poison, so all kinds of options for helping owls there. We have a section on owls as pets. Pro tip, owls do not make good pets. We even made a video all about why owls don't make good pets, so feel free to check that out later on. If you want to visit, unfortunately we are closed right now, but you can see what our facility looks like. You can learn more about our specific birds in general, or us as people. If you want to help us out, we are still working. I mean, this is my job basically, and we have to keep the lights on and feed the birds and all that kind of stuff. So we do offer memberships here. And if you are a member, you get free admission to the Owl Center for a year once it's open. You get free admission to our Owl Festival in March, discount admission at the Marine Art Museum in Winona and the National Eagle Center in Wabasha, which are both really cool places. Higher level members get a card with a feather from our Eurasian eagle owl, because she is not native to North America, so it would be illegal to have her feathers. If you find a feather from any native bird, it is technically illegal to keep it. As cool as they are, unfortunately, it is illegal to keep them. If you want to be a member, you can sign up here. You can do it through our online store. You can do it by mail. You can just mail in an application, not an application, membership form, or right here in the website. If you don't want to be a member, or you just want to help us out, you can just donate it. That's pretty cool too. See, you can donate here. You can do as much as you want. I didn't mean to click on that, and it's going to take a little while. It's going to try to take me to PayPal. Whoops. You can also buy dinner for the owls. Our owls eat a lot. It generally costs about $500 a month to feed all of our birds. So $550. So you can pay for one night or more, 1 week or more, 1 month or more. You can help us with feeding our owls. Let's see. We are planning an owl conference with all kinds of owl researchers, ideally next year. I see Ruby's back. I haven't gotten to the store yet, but we can do that once Carla is done with Ruby. So I'm going to stop sharing here and give you back to Ruby and Carla.
Helps if I unmute myself. This is Ruby the Great Horned Owl, and she's not very interested in the camera. She's very interested in the door over there and looking out the windows over here. Computers are boring, but that's fine. I mean, if you're an owl, you're more interested in the birds outside. So Ruby's feet, hopefully you can see them all right, are well feathered. Can you see her jesses? Yeah, she doesn't like having her feet touched. So this is a clip that I have on the glove that attaches to her jesses. And if you heard her hissing, that's her way of saying, don't do that. I don't like that very much. So I'll back off here a little bit. She's a great horned owl. She is, how old is she? 6 years old now. She just had a birthday. And she was hatched March 8th of 2014. And we know the exact date because she was hatched as part of our breeding project. Maybe Joe probably showed you the great horned owl camera. Ruby was hatched live on camera. She was one of our research birds. So the first year we were able to release the young. After that, we were not granted permits to release young anymore. Not that we had issues, but they just changed their minds. So Ruby she does double duty as an education bird. So we knew Alice, our oldest owl, was getting older and we needed younger owls to be education birds. So Ruby and her brother Rupert were purposefully, as icky as it was, removed at age 2 weeks from their parents and hand reared, but that allowed us to do two things: use them as education birds, but then also look at the vocal development of a human reared bird versus a parent reared bird, because it was vocalization research we were doing. And basically we found out the vocal development is the same, but they lack the context to do a lot of the vocalizations that they would have with their parents. So I knew what they would naturally do, so I could stimulate them by playing recordings. So everything works according to plan, but they just have to have the context to make those vocalizations. Ruby's not a real talkative owl. She's not a human imprint. So although she was hand reared, the setup was designed to isolate them from humans because the goal was releasing the owls originally. So that's what the facility was designed for. So she didn't have a ton of human contact. She definitely did have daily human contact, but she was raised with her brother. She knows she's an owl. She doesn't think she's a human like some of our others. She knows she's an owl. So she mostly hoots in our context if she's really mad at us. So if she hoots, it's like, oops, sorry, Ruby, we ticked you off. Or if we have wild male owls in the area, then sometimes she will hoot back to them. What do you think, Ruby? So she's a great horned owl. These are fairly common across all of North America. They go down into South America. There's a gap in their range, and the ones in South America, depends on who you ask, may or may not be the same species. They sound different. You can see she's doing all kinds of head movement. This is what owls do when they're trying to get better depth perception and figure out where exactly things are. So if she's looking at something closely, you'll see all this fun head bobbing going on. And sometimes she nibbles at me just because I'm here. So to her, I'm a tree. This is a branch that she's standing on. I'm the trunk. And as long as I keep, there's the poop. That's why we have coverings on the floor. As long as I keep this darned old hand away from her, then she's fine. She doesn't mind my face. She just doesn't like to be touched. Ruby weighs, she's on the hefty side. I think she's 4.4 pounds, because last time I weighed her, she was about 2,000 grams, which would be 2 kilograms, and there's 2.2 pounds per kilogram, so that would make her 4.4 pounds, which is on the hefty side for a great horned owl. Females weigh more than males, but still kind of hefty. She is a big girl, but yeah, she's kind of on the big side.
We have a question from Joyce. Why is it illegal to keep an owl feather one might find in the wild?
Oh, okay. So this goes back way back to the early 1900s when the ladies had the big hats with the feathers on them and sometimes whole dead birds. They were just about wiping out some of the species that had really nice plumage that they wanted for the hats. So when they protected the feathers, well, they protect the birds, but they also protect the feathers, because if you find a molted feather, there's no way to say this was a naturally molted feather versus I shot the bird and removed the feather from the bird. So that's why the feathers are protected. Because just imagine if somebody figured out, wow, great horned owl feathers make really good trout flies. You would get some people killing owls just to get them. So that's why it's just flat out illegal. We have to have special permits to have them, to use them for education, but a private person can't have them for personal use. But that's why they're protected, is because you can't tell if it was naturally molted or if the bird was killed for the feather.
Kinds of feathers in the wild that are good specimens, what should they do with them?
You can check with your local nature center to see if they're interested in them. If they have salvage permits, they may be able to keep them. Sometimes a school might be able to get permits to keep them, but it's not something you can keep yourself. And you don't have to feel bad about leaving feathers out in the wild, because it's really fun here. we have so many owls, so there's owl feathers all over the place. And when mourning dove nests and some other bird nests blow down in a storm, you'll see they have owl feathers in them. So they get put to good use by wildlife. Other question?
How can you pick up Ruby safely if she doesn't like her feet and Jess's touched?
How do I pick up Ruby? It's fun because she knows if I'm wearing this, she's going to get picked up to go to work. If I'm not wearing this, different story. So she'll sit on her perch and I can walk over to her and she'll hiss because she knows that's the deal. But I can put the glove up to her and sometimes I just have to touch a talon and then she'll step onto the glove because she knows if I'm wearing work clothes, she's going to have to get on the glove and do work.
Let's see. Willow asks, what is unique to great horned owls versus other owls?
Oh, hi, Willow. Willow is the awesome person that did that great video about the Owl Center for her class project. So if you haven't seen that, go to our Facebook page. She's posted it on YouTube. She did an awesome project for school about the Owl Center. And she's doing work on great horned owls right now. So the question was, what makes great horned owls different from other owls? Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So they're in the genus Bubo. So the only other Bubo owl we have in North America would be the snowy owl. And I don't think they're as similar as some other Bubo owls. If you go to South America, there is, like Hetty mentioned, the spotted eagle owl. There's grayish eagle owls. There's a whole bunch in Africa. Well, did I say South America? I meant Africa. In Africa, there's a whole bunch of different kinds. And then in Europe and Asia, they have the Eurasian eagle owl. But the Bubo owls typically have ear tufts. Snowy owls, not so much. But there are some other owls that have ear tufts too. Great horned owls are large. They're very strong for their size. So most people that handle birds of prey will say great horned owls are really tough customers. They have a nickname, the winged tiger, because they can kill really big prey for their size. They have really strong feet, as we heard about in their grip strength, very large eyes. And this is something I want to check. I read this once, that great horned owls in North America have the largest eyeball. So that would mean bigger than a snowy owl. And a snowy owl is actually bigger than a great horned owl. So I actually have eyeballs in the freezer that I haven't measured yet. But great horned owl eyeballs are really, really big in relation to their skull. And they have really wide heads. Some owls have wider skulls than other ones, and in owls, great horns and snowies, they're very wide. That was a yawn. So owls do yawn. Joe, any other thoughts? Or Marianne, what makes great horned owls different than other owls? They've got that nice white bib. Yeah, keep my hand away from you. Fine barring on the breast feathers. I'm not going to touch you, sorry. And
The phrase, I have some eyeballs in the freezer, is just a kind of a weird thing to say.
We have a freezer. We have one freezer that's rats and quail and mice and squirrels and things like that. So we have the owl food freezer. And then we have one freezer that's the specimen freezer. So right now, I think we have 13 different species of owls in it. And then like my personal food freezer is the little bitty one above my refrigerator. So the owls get most of the freezer space around here.
We have a question. Do great horned owls hunt in the same area as barred owls? We've seen both, but not at the same time.
Good question. Great horned owls and barred owls can be in the same places, but it's not advisable for the barred owls because great horned owls kill other owls up to and including other great horned owls, and that definitely includes barred owls. Sometimes you'll have shifts where, like South Park in Houston, used to always have barred owls. Now it has great horned owls and not barred owls. Around where I am, we normally have great horned owls, but there was a barred owl that came around for many, many months. And then one spring, well, it was that same year. So that was winter, and then spring, I went for an early spring walk and I found a barred owl feather and I thought, wow, that's great. And I kept walking and there was another one. Then there was a clump of them. Then where the great horned owl normally roosts, there was a whole pile of them. And I didn't hear the barred owl anymore. So They can overlap in habitat some, but it's not a good, smart thing for a barred owl to do.
Gail asks, if Ruby was fed less, would she be less hefty?
Well, to some degree, because they can regulate their metabolism. So a lot of people that train owls using food and reduce their weight, it's really hard to do that, because if Ruby doesn't get fed as much, she just slows down her metabolism, so she doesn't lose as much weight. So you can bring it down, but it's a little bit tricky because they have so much control over their metabolism. Right now, Piper, our barn owl, who weighs 1.25 pounds, is eating significantly more than Uhu, our Eurasian eagle owl, who's sitting on eggs and weighs probably about 5 pounds. So it just really varies, and an individual bird can vary their metabolism.
Do we need to trim their talons? Is it a 2-person job?
With Ruby, it's a 3-person job. And so coming up in the next few days, and this is tricky for us during COVID because we're not there, and us staff, we have not physically been together since the last day we're open, March 15th or 16th or something. And Ruby's beak, her bill, needs trimming. Her talons not as much, but her bill needs to be trimmed. And it will do some on its own, but it's getting kind of long. Yeah, sorry, Ruby. And JR's absolutely needs it because his has hooked so much that his lower mandible is actually catching on it sometimes. So it has to get done now. So my husband and I can do some of that, but we need a 3rd person. So Sue, our other educator, is going to come over hopefully in the next few days. And then one person will restrain her wings and body, another person restrains her feet, and then I'm usually holding the head while I'm working on the bill and or snipping the talon. So for us, we usually use 3 people on a big bird.
Let's see, Karen says there's a white owl occurring naturally in Hawaii. She'd like to know more about them.
Okay, so there's 2 owls that show up in Hawaii. One is native, and that's, the local word is pueo for that. It's a short-eared owl, and that's the one that's supposed to be in Hawaii. And that one's got, on the underside, it's kind of light. Underside of the wings is very pale, but the rest of the body is dark, like normal owl colors. The one that's very pale is the barn owl, not the barred, the B-A-R-N owl. That's very rare here. And that was introduced to Hawaii. And they're good at eating rats and small mammals, and maybe that's why somebody introduced them. There was one snowy owl one year that showed up in Hawaii at the airport, and they shot it because snowy owls and airplanes don't mix well. What are you looking at, Ruby? Oh, there's an orchard oriole out there. Cool. Good find, Ruby. Owls are good at bird watching.
Let's see. Do owls have more control over their metabolism than other birds of prey?
I think so, but I cannot say that positively or not. I just know that when you're training hawks for falconry, it's much easier to regulate their weight than owls. And owls are also way more stubborn too.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if you see flying bird shows, you're way more likely to have a hawk in it than an owl in it. And if it's an owl, it's very often a barn owl because they have a very high metabolism, or Eurasian eagle owls.
Does it hurt when we trim their beaks?
It hurts us usually because there's normally biting and grabbing involved. The goal is no blood for anybody. But you know, we're taking a Dremel to their bill, and the inside of their bill is bone. It's part of their skull. So I don't think it probably feels that pleasant. I've taken a Dremel to my fingernails just so I get an idea of what it feels like, and I mean, it's not real pleasant to have a Dremel grinding on your fingernails, and now imagine that being on your face. So it's not as bad as going to the dentist and having them drill in your teeth with no Novocaine probably, but I think it's probably unpleasant.
Is Uhu sitting on fertile eggs?
Uhu is sitting on infertile eggs because there's no male Eurasian eagle owl, so they're infertile. And because we're not open, we're just going to let her sit and see how long she wants to sit. think she laid them the beginning of April, I think. So we'll let her sit at least 6 weeks and just see how that goes. But normally, because our birds live off-site, right now it's very convenient that our birds do not live at the center. They live on my property here, so the Owl Center leases property, so I'm right by them. It's easy to take care of them. Nobody has to go anywhere. It's very good for this. It's not very good when we're open, because then every morning the birds have to get loaded into their transport carriers, loaded into the Owlmobile, driven to work, put on their perches, and they go back and forth. And now I forgot what the question was, because I rambled on so long.
I don't remember either. But we do have some other questions.
Go for it.
Do any of our owls pick their feathers?
No, I don't think we've ever had any owls. Rupert had some issues breaking feathers, but I don't think he wasn't picking at them to break them.
You see that a lot with parrots, and I think a lot of that's because parrots are really smart and they get bored easily, and owls are not that smart.
They're easily entertained just by watching birds outside.
Has an owl ever gotten away from us when trimming its beak?
I don't think so. Not that I remember.
How do owls manage the lengths of their bills in the wild? Do they chew on or gnaw on something in particular?
In the wild, they get a lot more wear and tear because they're flying around and exercising more, so they need more food. So A, they're eating more, and B, they're eating tougher things. So these guys are basically eating, well, most humans are going to prefer lamb over mutton. So think of these guys as getting lamb because they're getting young rats. And Ruby's not as fussy, but some of our birds, if it's not a young rat, forget it. I mean, if it's quail, I'm not eating it. If it's an old rat, I'm just going to skip eating for a night. So they're getting food that's not as tough and they don't have to work on it as much. They're not as exposed to the weather. Although they have access to the weather, they have the option of being under a sheltered portion and not sitting in the rain or not sitting in the snow. It's their choice, and some of the birds choose not to be in the weather as much, like JR. If it's raining, he doesn't sit in it. And that's probably part of the reason his bill is getting long. So moisture and heat and cold help wear them down. And then also they're going to be on rougher branches and surfaces. After they eat, they feek, they wipe their bill, they'll rub it on the side of a perch. And for these guys, that might be astroturf, it might be bark, but it's not going to be as rough as what they're encountering in the wild.
Let's see, this question. I know that owl eyes can compensate separately for light, but I've also heard they can focus independently. What do you think?
Well, they definitely compensate independently for light. So if one of Ruby's eyes was in the, yeah, she's not going to let me do it. If one eye is in the shadow, she can have one large pupil and one small pupil at the same time, which is kind of creepy because humans aren't supposed to be able to do that, but owls can. But I've never seen any indication that they focus independently. If she's looking at, because their eyes, I mean, most of their field of view is overlapped. They don't have as much peripheral vision with just a single eye as we do. They see most things binocularly. So I don't know that there would be any reason for them to focus independently. If she sees an eagle up in the sky, both pupils go down to little pinpoints to look at it. Or if she's looking at something really close, they get big, small, big, small, big, small, both in conjunction. So I have never seen evidence that they focus independently.
Let's see, Scott asks, do any owls besides snowy owls migrate?
Yeah, so owls are kind of weird. And so snowy owls technically are not considered migratory. They're considered eruptive, not eruptive like a volcano, eruptive, I-R-R-U-P-T-I-V-E. So it means they have movements that are erratic and not regular from year to year. So something that would be considered more normally migratory would be a northern saw-whet owl. So most years normally they go south in the winter, north in the summer. occasionally you get weird east-west movements, so it's not as straightforward as we'd like to think. And then you have some that are a little bit, I mean, long-eared owls are kind of migratory, but they're kind of nomadic also. They kind of wander. It's not as straightforward as short saw-whet owls. Yeah, and then there's some question if barn owls in the northern part of their range are migratory. They just kind of do weird movements. Owls are kind of a diverse lot that way. But great horned owls just stay resident on territory year round. Barred owls do, screech owls do. I'm not sure about some of the western ones. Burrowing owls, those are migratory. They do things a little bit weird. Some of them in Oregon may go, males can go north to Washington state because they want to stay close to their breeding area, but the females go to California for the winter, and then they both come back. But normally they go south. Some of the little insect eaters will go south in the winter when it's cold.
I have a request to comment on the killing of barred owls in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, Pacific Northwest, where the barred owls have showed up where the spotted owls are. It's a complicated, messy issue. So barred owls, B-A-R-R-E-D, in the eastern United States, they're supposed to be here. Everybody likes them. They're in balance with nature. But as us humans moved west, we planted trees across the Great Plains, and barred owls need trees where they live. So there weren't barred owls in the West before. But as we planted these trees, the barred owls eventually, our trees got big, enough habitat. They moved out to the Pacific Northwest and came into contact with spotted owls, which are a fairly close cousin. But spotted owls are far more timid. They're smaller. They're food specialists. So those of you who eat anything that gets put on the plate in front of you, you're a barred owl. You're a generalist, whatever. You'll do fine anywhere. Those of you who are fussy eaters and I only like this, this, and this, you're like spotted owls. So for a spotted owl to survive being a fussy eater, they have to have a huge territory to find the tree voles and the wood rats and the flying squirrels that they like, because they only like a few things. The barred owls, they come in and they're like, there's tons of food. They eat everything. So you can fit 4 or 5 barred owl territories in one spotted owl territory. And barred owls can outcompete, kill, and eat the food of spotted owls. So the only way that spotted owls are surviving is they have to shut up, because if barred owls find them, they will run them out, kill them, or whatever. So if the spotted owls aren't saying anything, they're not breeding, because that's part of their breeding. Excuse me, I have a hair in my face, and Ruby, of course, won't want my hand over there. So the other issue that spotted owls face is the logging of old growth forests in the Pacific Northwest, because that's their natural habitat. And logging has been an issue. That's people's bread and butter out there. So when you say you can't be logging the Pacific Northwest, then the loggers get all upset. So in the 90s, you had the logger spotted owl controversy. So the spotted owls just really have all kinds of things going against them. So now they're trying to protect the old growth forest, but the barred owls have moved in, and they're probably the biggest threat to spotted owls. And they've tried a bunch of things, but the only thing that has really shown any promise for helping spotted owls survive in the short term is experimental removal of barred owls. And that means shooting them and killing them, which is pretty offensive to a lot of people. And people are like, well, can't you just trap them and put them somewhere else? Well, where? I mean, every place else is kind of full, and trapping is not necessarily that easy to do. So it's extremely controversial. It is helping in the short term, where they've gone in, and they're being scientific. They're not just willy-nilly going out and shooting barred owls. And apparently it's quite easy to do, because those of you who have called barred owls know they're very vocal and very responsive. So they play a barred owl call, the barred owls come in and they shoot them. And if you think anybody's enjoying this, they're not. The guys that are doing this really, like, they're gonna need therapy afterwards. But they're doing it for scientific reasons and to try to save the spotted owl. Is it a long-term solution? Possibly, but it's something that would have to be done repeatedly. But of course, it's highly controversial, and there's lawsuits against it, and it's just a mess. And there's no right answer, because this is kind of an ethical dilemma. Us humans created the problem. So A, do you just let the barred owls do their things, and if they wipe out the spotted owl, well, too bad, so sad? Or do you go in and kill barred owls, which we put over there, to try and save the spotted owls? There's no nice answer to this question.
A question that should have a less complicated answer is, do Rusty and Iris have to have their beaks and talons trimmed as often as Ruby and the others? Is it harder to trim Rusty and Iris?
Rusty and Iris do indeed need to have beaks and talons trimmed. So those are our breeding pair. We don't handle them as much, so we kind of rely on our chat room moderators who are there watching them a lot to say, ooh, you know, their bills are getting really long or seem to have some issues with talons. So we try not to do it much because they're not used to people and it's very stressful for them to be handled. And especially Rusty with his really limited vision, anytime we catch him, we're probably re-injuring his eye or scratching the cornea. So it's something we have to think really seriously about before we do it. But actually, when it comes right down to it, those two are easier to do than our captive birds because they just kind of freeze and they just sit there. They don't wiggle, they don't struggle. They're quite easy to do compared to Ruby and Alice and those that are not scared of us people.
How often do our owls eat?
We feed our birds once a day, and then it's up to them. Sometimes they'll leave some we feed them in the evening because that's when they would naturally eat. So the food doesn't have to sit there all day. We feed them in the evening. And some of the birds will come back for breakfast in the morning if they have leftovers.
Let's see. I've heard of hybrid owls being found in the wild. Is that true? Interbreeding between spotted and barred owls and others. Find some pictures of hybrid owls.
Yeah, so they're spotted owls and barred owls can interbreed. They call the cross a sparred owl. And because in owls, females are bigger than males, when you have a cross, it's a female barred owl and a male spotted owl because the spotted is the smaller species. So you wouldn't want, they're just not okay with having a mate of the same size apparently. So you get a female barred, male spotted. The offspring is a sparred owl. And this tends to happen most when barred owls are first coming into an area of spotted owls where a barred owl can't find a mate of its own species. That's when it happens most. So it's not a common thing. And then the offspring are I can't remember if it's the females. The males are fertile and can back cross with a barred owl, but the females are not fertile. So you can't have two sparred owls breeding, which is good because then that waters down the gene pool. And then a sparred owl, they don't find mates. And I did get to hear one once out in Oregon, and they just sound like a barred owl that is very emphatic about saying something and they have no idea what to say. So I think the one that I had was something like, oh, 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 oh. It was a cross between the barred and the spotted, but it was just strange, really weird. So yes, you can get hybrids. Other species in the wild, I think there's been a long-eared, short-eared cross or long-eared something else. Hybrids are really rare, but spotted and barred would probably be the most common hybrid, even though they're not that common.
What about the schnoohu?
Oh, the schnoohu was in captivity. So there's a German fellow, and in Germany you can keep owls. Willy Burkhardt, I think is his name. And he had a female Eurasian eagle owl, so a large female, with a male snowy owl in a very large enclosure. And they had lived together. They're both bubo species. That's the genus. They had lived together for years and years and years, and nothing happened. And one year, the eagle owl laid eggs. And he just assumed they're not fertile. I mean, females lay infertile eggs. They just do. Except they hatched. And they look just like a cross between a snowy owl and a Eurasian eagle owl. But it's not a natural one that happens out in the wild. But they're called schnoohus because the German word for Eurasian eagle owl is uhu. That's why ours is named uhu. And a snowy owl is a Schneeeule. So Schnuhu is a cross between a snowy owl and a Eurasian eagle owl. Lots of good questions today.
I didn't see any other questions.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for stopping by. Oh, how did our owls get their names? Ruby and Rupert, we had a naming contest. Rusty and Iris, I gave their names based on Iris's eye injury and Rusty's coloration. Alice had her name when we got her. Uhu, we just had to name her Uhu because it was appropriate, because their call is woo, and it emphasized that she was a German species. JR got his name because we had one of our regular cam watchers and supporters, her name was Judy Ramier, and she died. Oh, there's a cat out there. This is the cat, look. We don't like cats. And Judy died quite rapidly from cancer, and specified that her memorials come to the Owl Center. And it was just when we were getting JR, and her her name was abbreviated in chat as JR, so we named JR after Judy. And then also the guy that raised JR, his name's Jack, and we also called him sometimes Jack Jr., so JR like Junior. So that's how he got his name, I think. Oh, and Piper, we had a naming contest for her also. Oh, I see somebody asked if beak clicking is common to all owls. As far as I know, all owls do that bill clacking, beak clicking, whatever you want to call it, the rapid snapping. As far as I know, I think they all do it. And that's kind of a go away, leave me alone. And this will be posted on YouTube later on.
How old can owls live?
Generally, the bigger the owl, the longer they live. So it's kind of the opposite of dogs. The longest we know of a great horned owl in the wild is 28 years. Excuse me. In captivity, if things go well, 20s or early 30s for a great horned owl. Supposedly there was one that lived to be 50, but I've never heard of any in late 30s or 40s. So that seems kind of weird. Eurasian eagle owl, supposedly there was one in captivity that lived to be 68. That seems a bit insane. I think 40s would be more common. But then something like a screech owl, I think the longest in the wild was 14 years. If that gives you some idea. Barn owls in the wild, they just die so easy. They're lucky if they do a year or two. But I think the record might even be over 10, 7, 10, something like that. Oh, the cat is walking by. Any other question? Barn owl record is 34 years. Was that in the United States, Laura, or was that in Europe? Because the European ones are probably a different species than ours. UK. Yeah, so I think for American ones, it's way shorter than that. Right now, they're in the process of splitting the barn owl, which they have said was all over the world, into 3 different species. So there's the one in the Americas, there's the one in Europe and Africa, and maybe part of Asia, and then the one in Australia is different also. They sound different, different sizes, like the European ones are way smaller than ours are.
Morgan wants to know how many kinds of owls there are.
Good question. Nobody can tell you that answer for certain. It's probably somewhere between 220 and 270. I mean, we usually guess around 250. They're still working out the genetics and arguing about which ones should be lumped and which ones should be split and that kind of stuff. So there's not a specific answer to that. If anybody gives you a specific number, take it with a shaker of salt.
How big are their territories?
Varies by species. So as we said, a spotted owl has a very big territory compared to a barred owl. Here, great horned owls are maybe around a square mile, but it depends on food. So if you've got a really good territory with a lot of food, it doesn't have to be as big as a territory maybe in a more arid place of the United States that has less food abundance. So even within the same species, it can vary. Other questions? Wow, we had a long question session on this.
It's almost 11:30.
Holy moly. Okay, well, I think we shall wrap this up then, and see you next week to talk about owl vocalizations, where you get to learn to hoot or toot or whinny or trill like an owl. So thanks for joining us.
If you want to check out our online store, we are still shipping items from there. I didn't get to the store part yet.
Oh, yeah.
So we have like shirts and socks and hats and jewelry and cups. There's another poop. We have some puzzles. We do have some new things in. So feel free to check that out. You can get memberships and donations on our website too. Excuse me. But I think that's pretty much it. Do we ship to Canada? We can try.
Yep, so shoot us an email if you want us to ship to a different country, and then we'll do some special shipping calculations and make sure it's something that we can ship. And we would need your address and phone number to be able to calculate the shipping address for another country. We have an order, we have a giant snowy owl going to Hungary today. That's a plush owl, I should specify. It's not a live one, it's a plush one. So we do ship elsewhere in the world if needed. Okay, thank you very much. And we will see you later, next week, hopefully. Bye.
So thank you all for joining us. If you like the program, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Facebook, and consider becoming a member. Check out the links in the description below. Join us next week for our chat about owl calls and vocalizations. Be safe, and thanks for making the world a better place for owls.